Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of our 1515 podcast. I'm Chris Capewell. I'm the global head of the regulatory team here at Maples. Today I'm joined by my fellow colleague Patrick Head. He's a partner in the regulatory team, and Jen Parsons, who's a senior PSL, also helping out with the regulatory team. As always, the contents of today's podcast do not constitute legal advice, and you should speak to an attorney at Maples if you do need legal advice, and it's a general update only. I can probably launch off, I guess, with a very relevant topic that we've all been talking about, and I've been engaging with DITC on too, is CRS, Principal Point of Contact. There was a really useful industry update that came out on, and I do have it in front of me, on the 21st of January that really clarified a PPOC and what it means to be in the islands. It's still not as detailed as we would like. It's fairly high level because we're waiting on further guidance. But effectively, the PPOC in the islands can be both a natural person and it can be an entity. The industry advisory makes it quite clear that the PPOC really needs to be someone on islands so that DITC can connect with them and have contact, and they're going to be very responsive to the DITC. So that's useful. There will be guidance coming out that will provide us with further detail. The other important point that came out from the industry advisory is just on the filing deadline. So currently, any entity that is an FI within 2025 needs to file in April of 2026 and register with the DITC. There was an issue. They did need to register the PPOC details as well, because industry was concerned as to what in the islands actually meant. There's now been an extension, so every FI only needs to provide the PPOC details. I think it's by 31st of January 2027. So that includes FIs that are registered in 2020. FIs that are FIs in 2025. So if you are an FI in 2025, you still do need to register by April of this year. You just do not need to include the PPOC details. So every single FI will now be filing those PPOC details on 31st of January 2027. So Jen, that is CRS in a nutshell. Am I able to turn over to you on whatever topic you want to talk about? Because then we're going to turn over to Pat on the digital side. But I do know you want to talk about beneficial ownership, and I do know you want to talk about a draft rule that we saw a day or so ago. So over to you, Jen.
Thanks very much, Chris. Yeah, I think I'll kick off then with the beneficial ownership update. Just to point out that in January, the Cayman Islands did pass the Beneficial Ownership Transparency Amendment Number 2 Act 2025. And then also the Beneficial Ownership Transparency Amendment Regulations 2026. Just a few quick points I think that we want to point out with respect to the Amendment Act and the Amendment Regulations. With regard to the Amendment Act, Section 18 and 19, what's going on here is the prior drafting made it unclear when a restriction notice could be issued. So these sections now clarified the timing of issuing a Section 18 notice and then the timing and conditions for a restrictions notice. So this is a great time, I think, to remind listeners that corporate service providers, as well as legal persons under the Beneficial Ownership Transparency Act, do have the obligation to issue notices under the regime in various circumstances. And ultimately, penalties can arise for legal persons for the failure to take action, and restrictions are capable of being placed on certain non-compliance interest holders. So important to just take this opportunity to mention that. With regard to the amendment regulations, again, we've just got some cleanup happening in the Regulation 2. It clarifies the approach that indirect interests can only be held through entities, whether Cayman Islands or foreign, that have separate legal personality. So previously, the use of the term legal person could have resulted in an interpretation of the indirect interest test, which excluded foreign entities from scope. So this really just reflects our understanding and our approach overall, not particularly contentious, but again, it's a clarifying sort of amendment. Then in sections 26 and 29 of the regulations, these go to the point regarding the discretion by the registrar to impose administrative fines and the amount of those fines. And this already, again, reflected our view of how the administrative fines regime for BOTA ought to be applied. But so we consider it a welcome amendment.
Thanks, Jen. Pat, you're here for from the crypto conference. You got 15 minutes or so, and I know you're burning to talk about a few things, VASP and also digital tokenized funds. So over to you. If you can just canvass both of those as much as you can. I know on the tokenized funds, everyone's pretty keen to hear about that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's a busy week with conferences on. So far, a few good events, including a nice rig panel last night over at Cayman, so that was excellent. Exciting news in Cayman. Just last week on the 4th, the government gazetted 3 amendment bills, so they're now currently before Parliament, and those are amendments to the Mutual Funds Act and the Private Funds Act, and also the Virtual Asset Service Providers Act, to establish sort of a new comprehensive framework for the tokenization of regulated investment funds in the jurisdiction. Very sort of pleasingly, I think industry reaction is also very happy so far, is the fact that the proposed bill is kind of, dial back, I think, on they reflect prior sort of industry consultation on the initial proposed amendments to those frameworks. But what they really do is clarify, in essence, that an investment fund will just remain subject to and regulated by either the Mutual Funds Act or the Private Funds Act as either a private fund or mutual fund. They will not also be subject to dual regulation as a token issuer under the Virtual Asset Service Providers Act. So that's sort of number one, sort of the most welcome news that everybody wanted to hear in industry. It also kind of reflects Cayman's position that, we can sort of be have sort of agnostic regulations towards technology and the use of technology. And again, it just kind of recognizes the progression of technology that, supports more the middle office, back office, and sort of record keeping processes of how funds operate. So that's all good news. Some of the key points that will come out of it and key requirements do cover enhanced record keeping obligations for any fund that is issuing its investment interests in a tokenized form. Obviously, the introduction of new technology does create potentially new risks. So again, the risk disclosures in offering documentation needs to be enhanced to accurately describe what those risks are, and then how the fund proposes to mitigate those risks. Sort of key part to that will be, service providers and obviously ensuring that, working with reputable brands and people who do appreciate sort of that they are dealing with securities after all, and that the, issuance, record holding, alignment with the statutory register of members, transfers, etc., all need to conform with those requirements, in particular those record keeping requirements. There's then going to be an annual confirmation requirement for operators of these vehicles. That will fall directly on the operators of a private vehicle to confirm that all of their record keeping obligations do adhere to these new requirements. For mutual funds, that will fall onto the administrator to make that confirmation on behalf of the fund. As I mentioned, there are sort of, again, transfer restrictions embedded into the proposed amendments, which makes sense when you view this instrument. It is a security instrument. The statutory register of members or partners needs to be the prima facie sort of source of truth for who is a member. Restrictions need to be only made with the approval of the operators of the vehicles in accordance with the offering and constitutional documents. So again, these are all rules that you would expect ordinarily to see with a mutual fund or private fund. So I think out of all of that, it's good. It's exciting news for Cayman. It means that Cayman sort of has removed any perceived barriers for large institutional clients who sort of don't want to take on risk, etc. To now move forward and to look at Cayman as really their sort of choice of jurisdiction for issuing tokenized vehicles. So that's exciting news. Hopefully those bills will be passed early next month, the next Parliament sitting.
And Pat, where does that, in terms of competing jurisdictions, where does that land us?
I think that actually lands us really favorably with, our key sort of competitors at the moment tend to be through Switzerland, Luxembourg, Singapore a little bit for these types of products. I know that Ireland and the UK, we're sort of involved with consultation processes in Ireland, are moving in this direction, but it's actually, it's not an easy sort of process to get through. And I think actually, Cayman has been able to position itself quite nicely now, quite sort of relatively early actually in the process to have just clarity around how we will approach this particular aspect of the use of blockchain technology for funds. So I think, when people are now looking between Lux, potentially Ireland moving forward, Cayman, Singapore, Switzerland, I think Cayman is now sort of well positioned, because given that, we're sort of the fundamental principle being you will still be regulated as a fund, that provides that clarity that people want. So I think it's a really good opportunity for the industry as a whole.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Good job to you helping with the drafting of that. Good job to the government and industry generally. I know there's been a lot of people involved with this, but a really positive result for industry. So well done. So from the positive, Pat, do you want to talk about more VASP regulatory measures?
Yeah. So just off the back of those, the exciting news, we've also had issued by SIBA updated rules and statement of guidance for virtual asset service providers. Now, we were seeking further clarification around the licensees, so running a virtual asset trading platform or for custodians. So that's kind of welcome to see the new statements of guidance and rules there. But in addition, there's the market conduct rule and statement of guidance combined, which is new. That is fairly comprehensive set of framework of information and points that operators do need to comply with. And then one of the sort of points I was talking with insurance providers yesterday is there is now sort of more clear, enhanced requirements around insurance products. And again, that was kind of only briefly covered in prior iterations. So I think that's welcomed in the industry, but it does, sort of put operators in this space on notice that they do need to look to have, comprehensive insurance in place that's going to cover, professional indemnity, loss of client assets, business interruptions, cybersecurity risks as well. The rules also are going to look a lot at integrity, conflicts of interest, just client assets sort of safeguards, market abuse type activity. So these are, again, points that you would expect to see in normal kind of operating models, maybe more so drawing a little bit more on the traditional financial services industry funds model. But definitely these aspects are going to be applicable to virtual asset service providers and licensees as well. So that is a document that I think anybody who is either registered at the moment or licensed or in the process of doing so, they really do need to get across these additional rules and statements of guidance to ensure that they are then operationally compliant with the regime moving forward.
Yeah, and as you said, I don't think it's a bad thing that those measures are coming through. Sort of goes hand in glove with the emergence of the industry. Okay, Jen, we've talked about tokenization, we've talked about VASP, so let's go into SIBA. We thought we were done with the SIBA AML return that's required, but now there's a new survey. Are you able to just talk about that?
Great. Yeah, thanks, Chris. So in addition to many SIBA registered persons, of course, are already familiar with the fact that they would be doing an AML survey. We've got a new survey now that launched on the 31st of December. And that is the Prudential Information Survey for registered persons. It's basically going to be an annual survey with 40 questions done in the form of a return. It's very important to point out that this particular survey is only going to be available on SIMA's Reefs platform. So that is how you access it. It is also how you file it. And it will need to be filed by the 31st of March, 2026. Also important to note that it basically covers the preceding calendar year of activity. The purpose here of the survey is to gauge business, market, legal, AML, CFT, CPF sanctions, resilience, tech, outsourcing, and governance risks. SIMA has issued guidance to assist registered persons on completing the Prudential Information Survey, and that is available on their website. That will provide technical instruction and clarification on the information to be submitted. The other thing that we need to point out here is that this does not in any way supplant the existing requirements for the annual declaration or the AML survey obligations that I had mentioned.
Okay, I think that's it for us now. We are up against it. Thanks very much to Jen. I did drag you into this only yesterday, so thanks very much for coming on, and thanks very much, Pat, for jumping out the conference to give us 10 minutes. Much appreciated. And thank you, of course, to everyone for listening. Thank you. Take care. Speak to you on the next one.
Much.
Bye.